So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And wow, what an impressive week this is for me, being a Navy doctor. I mean, yesterday, flying at the speed of light over the waves in the Bay of Copenhagen. Awesome, amazing, really. I can only say one thing, wow. This is a small movie I stole from YouTube. And indeed, it's amazing what these boats can do. Look at these waves. And it's amazing. I mean, this boat is not going with that high speed, which maybe is a good thing with these waves. But again, it's awesome, isn't it? I mean, wow, what these boats can do. It's really, I mean, for me, it's a new thing, but this is really incredible. Wouldn't you agree with me? I guess so, yeah. I mean, but what happens with the people who are inside that boat? And just bear with me. Indeed, I would say unbelievable. I'm Sergeant Commander Jaap Boreel from Netherlands Navy. I'm currently the Senior Advisor Public Health at our Expert Center of Force Health Protection at the Ministry of Defense. And I serve the Ministry of Defense as well as the Office of our Surgeon General. I have been a Navy doctor for almost 13 years now. I have quite a bit of operational experience, particularly with the Dutch Marines. I've been deployed as a unit doctor to Cambodia, Haiti, Special Forces missions in Bosnia and in Afghanistan. A few years ago, I took a master's course in control of infectious diseases at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and specializing more in the prevention of infectious diseases and tropical diseases. I only have very limited experience with high-speed boats. One maybe just to mention, a long time during amphibious exercises, a long time ago, with the Dutch Marines and British Marines off the coast of Norway, and with a nightly exercise, our boat, actually the same thing what happened this afternoon with one of the unfortunate boats moored alongside the quay, but we were at open sea and our boat started to sink at the middle of the night. This was quite, I can tell you, an interesting experience. And some more recent experience with, well, maybe not really a high-speed boat, but this is my own RIP. Only 15 horsepower, so nothing to be compared with the monsters you can see outside. But anyway, that's my private, then that's basically the experience I personally have with high-speed boats. So, high-speed boat operations and health risks. Now, does anyone know some of these health risks? I guess so, because some of them were already mentioned, for instance, by Johan Ullman yesterday. So I guess you already have some sort of idea. So it's mainly, of course, the effects of vibrations and shocks, and some other health risks, which I will not discuss during this presentation, such as, for instance, hypothermia and accidents. So physical effects mainly are caused by the whole body vibrations and by repeated shocks, obviously caused by boats at high speeds, slamming and rolling on the waves, or even maybe cutting through the waves. Obviously, the faster the boat sails and the higher the waves, the stronger these effects, of course, may be. But what also plays an important role is how the boats are being maneuvered, what the behavior of the drivers is, which was discussed earlier with the previous presentation. How sharp turns are made, what the posture of crew members and passengers is, etc., etc., etc. So a lot of factors. And forces can come also from different angles and directions, from the vertical, basically, from the frontal posterior, and from the lateral direction. And this may have very different implications. So effects vary based on characteristics of the vibrations and the shocks, such as the strength and intensity of the forces, the frequency of vibrations and shocks, and the resulting directions of the forces in different angles. Also, the duration of the exposure, of course, is an important factor. The longer the exposure and the more frequent periods of exposures are, the higher, of course, the impact of the body of those who are being exposed. You saw this video again, but again, bear with me and just pay attention on the two guys, one in the back. And you saw, and you can see that, but if you have a closer look, of course, at the impact of the body of this guy and the other crew members, you can also observe that the shocks by the slamming of the boat can come at unexpected moments. Needless to say that what might happen at night or during circumstances with low visibility, when you cannot anticipate for these shocks. Now, vibrations and shocks can be measured, for instance, with certain deceleration measuring devices, which passengers or crew members can carry with them. And then you will see graphs like what you see here. And you can also clearly see on this graph that the strength of the forces, particularly the peak decelerations, can be as high as 7 to 10 G in this experiment of Dutch Marines sailing on their frisks. But also you can clearly see that the higher the sea state and the higher the speed, the more impact. And what anyone with some sense of biodynamics will also understand is that the impact also varies by the angle of the waves with regards of the course of the boat. So again, of course, you can see clear difference also on this graph with the vibrations measured against the waves versus vibrations measured at different speeds with waves in the back. Now this slide just to illustrate to you the relationship between the dose and the response. The dose being the result of forces and its duration. The forces, of course, influenced by wind, waves, speed, and also, of course, characteristics of the boat type, the level of suspension of seats, etc., etc. On the other side of the equation, the response will be also influenced by various human factors, such as physical condition, the medical history, body posture, but also experience on how to cope under harsh conditions, experience and level of the training of the boat driver and other crew members. Obviously, increasing duration of exposure and possibly insufficient time to recover will lead also to repeated exposure to shocks and vibrations, which may lead to an accumulation of harmful effects on the body, as Jan Ullman also mentioned already yesterday. Now here just to show you some health effects. First of all, some acute effects such as strains and stress fractures of vertebrae, spondylolisthesis and spondylolysis of the vertebrae, which basically means the shifting of vertebrae and damage to the discs in between. Obviously, one important injury could be whiplash, injuries of the neck, joint luxations, decreased post-transit physical fatigue, kidney contusions, blood in urine, etc. Some more subacute effects could be joint instability, vertical disc problems, and the so-called hand-arm vibration syndrome, fatigue of the neurosensoric system. And some chronic effects, although not much yet is known about real chronic effects, but obviously joint and back degeneration and arthrosis could be risks, and also hearing impairments, and even sometimes traumatic brain injury, which may in the end lead to, for instance, Alzheimer's disease. So all in all, not unimportant. So as you can see, it doesn't look like rocket science to understand that high-speed boat operations could lead to health problems, particularly for those who are exposed frequently. However, even short coincidental situations on board of high-speed boats could have an important impact to the health of exposed individuals. Now, what does approach the level of rocket science, though, is all the efforts and complexity of finding workable and adequate solutions to prevent the harmful effects of these high-speed boat operations. Now, I'll just mention a few potential solution directions, which are currently looked at in various nations and in numerous research and development trials, as well as in setting ISO directions and regulations within the EU or other international contexts. Now, here are some technical solutions. The suspension seat, I think we have all by the time set on them during the trials. But the suspension seat being one of the most practical developments, I would say. But there are also even systems where they have suspension hull systems. Like the whole boat is basically like a suspension system. Now, sorry for this busy slide, but here are some solutions related to human factors. And in my opinion, the most practical and important ones, which aim for a more safe and responsible way of operating the high-speed boats. And also, it's important that everyone understands that actually it's man who is the limiting factor here. No matter how fast the boats can go, how good they are, how good their suspension system is, still man is the limiting factor. And that's very important to keep in the back of your minds. Now, here's some of the longer-term potential solutions. I won't go into much detail, but mainly there should be an emphasis on international cooperation, sharing of data and knowledge. Also, something which Johan Uman already mentioned just a few minutes ago, the importance of cooperation and working together, sharing research data, etc. Now, just some quick conclusions. First of all, obviously the whole issue of vibrations and shocks is an international issue. Specific training and continuous health monitoring are essential elements in prevention of harmful effects of repeated shock and whole body vibrations. New legislative guidelines for the maritime world should be developed. And coalition partners, of course, you probably understand that, are still in a learning process. We're not there yet. Research is still being done, etc., etc. So, but maybe in the future there will be some more solutions. And again, I'd like to stress that man is the limiting factor, not machines. Now, having said all this, have I now covered the main health risks of high-speed boat operations? What do you think? Yes? Or maybe not? I think not. Now, let's imagine the operation theaters. Where could these be situated? Are these all concentrated around our home countries? I don't think so. Nowadays, we fight against pirates around the Horn of Africa. We do counter-drug operations in the Caribbean, special operations with riverine patrols and reconnaissance around West Africa and the Middle East. And of course, we have Frontex operations in the Mediterranean, etc., etc., etc. And yes, also in those theaters, of course, the risk of injuries due to vibrations and shocks will be very much the same as in our own waters. But there is more. And as an expert in control of infectious diseases and public health, that is what I consider mostly my business and responsibility. So what about tropical and infectious diseases? What about pollution and bad hygiene? What about the risks due to pollution and toxic industrial chemicals? You know, all the soldiers who are steering these boats, and also they're not at sea all the time, they go ashore and they might be exposed. So instead of only focusing on these aforementioned harmful effects caused by vibrations and shocks, one should not forget about other, maybe even more serious or acute risks. And you see here just a few examples of these risks. Now, in the military, we call these diseases disease non-battle injuries, as opposed to battle injuries. But by the way, the occupational health effects of vibrations and shocks are also classified as disease non-battle injuries. So I'm talking about preventable tropical diseases, such as malaria. Here you see the malaria mosquito, uh, just for you to know, not shown in its actual size. But also dengue fever, influenza, other viral diseases, and some even extremely infectious and dangerous diseases, such as Ebola, for example, but also food poisoning, diarrheal diseases related with insufficient hygiene, typhoid fever, etc., etc. And then, of course, also other health threats, such as heat and cold injuries, might pop up. And all these diseases pose clear and present dangers to all those who might be exposed to these diseases. And I can tell you, becoming sick by any of these diseases will not only spoil your day, but could also be potentially lethal. And even worse, from an operational perspective, these diseases could also have a significant effect on mission success or mission failure. So in order to prevent mission failure, but instead aim for mission success, that's why adequate and timely operational planning is so important. And this has been a crucial factor in the past, but was also important less long ago during World War II, for instance, during the Battle of Arnhem. And according to a British general, Montgomery, Operation Market Garden was for 90% a success. Well, I can tell you that Prince Royal in those days, Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, commented on that my country can never again afford the luxury of another Montgomery success. So adequate military planning has and will always be crucial for campaign success. Now, similarly with the importance of proper military planning, as part of this overall campaign military planning, it's also important to do a proper medical planning, in which an assessment will be made of all the health threats during military campaign. Commanders must be made aware of them, this to avoid loss of fighting power as much as possible and avert mission failure. And this is where medical intelligence and force health protection come into the picture, to assess the health threats for a particular mission and ensure that all the necessary preventive actions are taken. From a health perspective, this is a crucial part for military or operational planning. Now, looking back a long time ago, the legend says that Alexander the Great, after many of his victories, succumbed and died of malaria. So all in all, this tiny little mosquito in this occasion played a significant role in the course of history. But also in recent history, one can see the importance and impact of force health protection, or what could happen when force health protection information and advice is neglected or ignored. General MacArthur, for instance, a big strategist, was smart and recognized the importance of keeping his troops healthy and fit. But history repeats itself, unfortunately, and people easily forget the importance of force health protection. For instance, later in Vietnam, malaria led to more casualties amongst the US troops than bullets did. And during the years of the Vietnam War, the US suffered from 40,000 cases amongst the US troops of malaria, with 78 deaths. And some units actually suffered more than 50% in fighting power due to malaria. So not something just to ignore. But even now, in modern times, with all the current knowledge on impact, severity, and preventive measures against infectious diseases, still sometimes we continue to make the same mistake and forget to take force health protection into account. For instance, recently in 2000, a short military operation of British paratroopers in Sierra Leone, they had dozens of cases of malaria amongst their own troops due to bad preparations and ignoring known health risks. And again, a short operation of the US Marines in Liberia in 2003, again, faulty medical planning, and without usage of bed nets, only 55% compliance for the malaria chemoprophylaxis, which they were supposed to take, insufficient application of repellents, etc. They suffered a 36% attack rate of falciparum malaria, which is the serious form of malaria. So one could easily understand that such numbers of sick cases will have a very bad effect on the chances for a successful mission. So now just to reiterate, and I'm going to finish soon. What were the biggest health risks, again, from high-speed boat operations? Indeed, not only the obvious vibrations and shocks, but also a whole range of potential other health threats, depending on the area of operations where one will operate the high-speed boats. I hope with this presentation I have informed you just a little bit about the most important health effects related to high-speed boat operations, but I also hope that you that I have made you aware of the fact that there are more and sometimes more acute health risks looming over the horizon than only the dangers of vibrations and shocks.